Large age gaps are not unexpected in Hollywood. Even in the modern day, fans are used to seeing older celebrities date people young enough to be their children or even grandchildren. There seem to be very few, if any, old Hollywood relationships where the woman was significantly older. One exception could be Dolores Del Rio and Orson Welles. The first Mexican superstar in Hollywood was 11 years older than the multi-hyphenate Wells. He saw her in a film in 1932 when he was about 17 years old and would later say, "That's when I fell in love with her. It changed my life." After finally meeting at a party in 1939, the pair began a relationship that lasted several years before it imploded. While 11 years is not an insignificant age gap, it pales in comparison to many other relationships from time to time. While some female stars of old Hollywood would go on to date younger men in their later years during the 1970s and 80s, when it came to the golden age of Hollywood, it was older men dating and marrying younger women, in many cases, too young. Here is a list of celebrity couples with too much age gap. Charlie Chaplin and several wives. Charlie Chaplin married 4 times, and 3 of those wives were teenagers. 2 of them were actually underage. His first wife, Mildred Harris, shared her side of their story in a newspaper article back in 1927. She said Chaplin saw her in a film when she was just 12 and met her when she was 15. They started dating, but Mildred admitted she was still very young, both mentally and in age. They got married when she was 16 because she mistakenly thought she was pregnant, but the marriage didn't last, and they divorced 2 years later. Then there's Chaplin's second wife, Lita Gray. She was only 12 when they met and got pregnant by him when she was 15. Their marriage also didn't last long. In 1932, Mildred Harris told a reporter from the Vancouver Sun about Chaplin's divorces, saying, "Too much sweet 16, that's Charlie's trouble. What he needs, to be really happy, is a woman of about 30, a woman with a full knowledge of human nature." Chaplin almost took that advice when he married his third wife, Paulette Goddard, who was around 25 when they tied the knot in 1936. But even that marriage ended after 6 years. His final and longest marriage was to Una O'Neill, daughter of the playwright Eugene O'Neill. She was 18 and he was 54, just 6 months younger than her father, when they got married. They stayed together until Chaplin's death, enjoying a 34-year marriage that stood in stark contrast to his earlier, much shorter unions. John Huston and Enrica Soma. When the actor Anjelica Huston was asked by Vulture for her thoughts on May-December relationships, she said, "I think there are some younger women with older guys who love them and stay with them forever. I don't know. I think it depends on the case." One case study she saw close up was that of her parents. The director John Huston met his future wife Enrica Soma when she was 14. According to Angelica in her memoir, via Vanity Fair, they met at Soma's father's speakeasy. John said to the ballet-loving teenager, "I'll tell you what. I'll take you to the ballet. How about that?" Fortunately, the date never happened, and the two did not begin a relationship until they met again at a dinner party a few years later. By then, Soma was 18. John was on wife number 3. But that didn't stop him from getting his young mistress pregnant with a son. February 10, 1950 ended up being a busy day for the director, as he was in Mexico to both get a divorce and get remarried immediately afterward. Soma was 20, John was 45. Their marriage was far from a fairy tale. Soma had a third child, Allegra, who was raised believing John Huston was her father, until the truth that her mother conceived her when she had an affair with an English lord was sprung on her at age 12. The couple never divorced, however. Soma died in 1969, aged 39. William Randolph Hearst and Marion Davies. Newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst first saw Marion Davies in 1917 when she was dancing as a chorus girl in Broadway's Ziegfeld Follies. She was 20 years old. He was 54. According to Captain of Her Soul, The Life of Marion Davies by Lara Gabriel, what started as phone calls turned into regular meetings. Soon he was sending her expensive gifts. But their relationship had to be kept a secret from his elderly mother and his wife, Millicent. Because Millicent was a devout Catholic, Divorce was never an option. Eventually, the affair was impossible to hide from her, and Hurst began living openly with Davies, especially at his estates in California. The almost 34-year age difference between the couple led Hurst to the point of irrationality. In 1925, he hired a detective agency to tail Davies and send him detailed reports of everything she did and everyone she saw when he was away. Davies' close friendship with Charlie Chaplin was especially concerning to Hurst, and he sent at least one letter breaking up with her, writing that she was welcome to Chaplin, whom he called a dirty little ignorant Cockney clown. However, despite his jealousy, the couple stayed together until his death. During that time, Davies had an impressive career of her own, becoming renowned for her comedic abilities, producing films herself, and even loaning Hurst $1 million when his company was in trouble. When Hurst died in 1951, Davies was not allowed to attend his funeral. Hedy Lamarr and Jean Markey. Hedy Lamarr, the glamorous actress and brilliant inventor, had a cool romance with Jean Markey, a writer who was 12 years older than her. Their relationship wasn't as massive of an age gap as some other Hollywood stories, but it still stood out back in the day. Hedy and Jean connected on a deep intellectual level, sharing ideas and passions beyond just the glitz and glamour of the movie scene. They would often chat about Hedy's inventive side and Jean's writing projects, making their time together really meaningful. Even though their romance didn't lead to marriage, it showed that old Hollywood wasn't just about the big age differences and dramatic love stories. Sometimes it was about genuine connections and mutual respect, no matter the age difference. Their relationship adds another interesting layer to the tapestry of Hollywood's golden era romances, proving that meaningful bonds can form in all sorts of ways. Vincente Minnelli and Judy Garland. Judy Garland was thrown into Hollywood when she was barely a teenager. By the time she was 21, she was already married to composer David Rose, 12 years older than her, but she had her eye on producer Joe Mankiewicz, 13 years older than her, and also married. But when she started filming Meet Me in St. Louis, directed by her future husband Vincente Minnelli, Garland began a relationship with her male co-star. In fact, if anything, Minnelli drove her crazy with his direction, which was both vague and exacting, requiring far more takes than Garland was used to requiring to nail a scene. Garland, Minnelli, and a few other people from the set would often have dinner together, usually just as a break from working. But one night, cancellations meant it was just the two of them, and it must have gone well, because after that, the private dinners continued. Of course, Garland was still married to Rose at this point, and there were other complications as well, namely that she started up an affair with Mankiewicz again, and that Minnelli was gay. While plenty of people allegedly told Garland this fact, she ignored it. In June 1945, a week after divorcing her first husband, Garland married Minnelli in a small, private ceremony. She had turned 23 just days before. He was 42. They quickly had a daughter, Liza, but the issues they had ignored, including Garland's affair with Orson Welles during her engagement to Minnelli, doomed the marriage, and they divorced in 1951. Errol Flynn, two of his wives, and several underage girls. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the swashbuckling actor Errol Flynn had a favorite saying, "I like my whiskey old and my women young." The only thing off about it was calling them women, since they were usually girls, in many cases, criminally so. Back in 1943, Flynn was accused of raping two 17-year-old girls. Even though he was acquitted, he later wrote in his autobiography, via Vanity Fair, "I might have been guilty as hell, under the law that is. But in the world of day-to-day common sense, everybody knew that the girls had asked for it, whether or not I had my wicked ways with them." During the trial, he flirted with an 18-year-old named Nora Eddington, who the 34-year-old actor eventually married. After they divorced in 1949, the now 41-year-old Flynn married the 23-year-old Patrice Wymore the following year. Flynn died suddenly in 1959 at age 50 while on a trip to Canada with his 17-year-old mistress Beverly Fisher, whom he'd been seeing for 2 years. When they landed, a reporter at the airport asked Flynn why he liked young girls so much, and the actor gave an extremely vulgar retort. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Lauren Bacall landed her first big role opposite Humphrey Bogart in To Have and Have Not. Back in 2011, Bacall told Vanity Fair that when she first met Bogey before filming, there was no clap of thunder, no lightning bolt, just a simple "how do you do?" He seemed a friendly man. But pretty quickly during the shoot, they fell for each other. The age gap was pretty noticeable. Bogart was 45 and Lauren was just 20, making it a 25-year difference. But it wasn't the age that stopped them from getting together. It was that Bogey was already married to Mayo Methot. Mayo had her own issues with alcohol and intense jealousy, which even led to her stabbing Bogey once. Eventually, Bogart managed to get a divorce, luckily without any bloodshed. They tied the knot in 1945, and Lauren later said, "Bogey was 25 years my senior. I knew everybody because I was married to Bogey, and that 25-year difference was the most fantastic thing for me to have in my life." However, the age difference actually hurt her career because Bogey wanted her to be more of a traditional wife rather than a working actress. Even though both had emotional affairs during their marriage, they stayed together until Bogart's death from cancer in 1957. Lauren was just 32 when she became a widow. Jean Harlow and Paul Byrne. Jean Harlow was the blonde bombshell of 1930s Hollywood. Her first marriage, while still a teenager, ended in divorce once she became successful. Harlow secured the role that would take her to superstardom in the 1932 film Red-Headed Woman, thanks to the successful producer Paul Byrne, and the pair began a relationship. On July 2, 1932, the couple married in a ceremony that seemed to take Hollywood by surprise, not because of the age difference, but because no one ever thought Byrne would give up his bachelor lifestyle. Paul Byrne, The Life and Famous Death of the MGM Director and Husband of Harlow, by E.J. Fleming, notes that the Los Angeles Times did pointedly mention the age gap. However, quoting the paper, italics and all, that the wedding climaxed a romance in which Miss Harlow, now 21, took as her husband a man considerably her senior. Born in 1889, Byrne was 41 at the time of their wedding. The marriage lasted 2 months. On September 5th, Byrne was found dead at their home, seemingly having died by suicide. However, questions would quickly be raised when police discovered he had married a woman named Dorothy Millette many years before, and they had never divorced. In fact, he regularly sent her money, and they corresponded often. She was in California at the time of his death, and when she died by suicide shortly afterward, some wondered if she'd had something to do with it. Elizabeth Taylor and several husbands. Elizabeth Taylor famously married 8 times, twice to the actor Richard Burton. But before Liz and Dick was a thing, she married husband number 2, the actor Michael Wilding, pictured. The two were starring in a film together in 1951, and it was actually she who proposed to him. According to The Life of Elizabeth Taylor by Alexander Walker, Wilding had not wanted to marry her because legally she wasn't old enough to walk down the aisle without her parents' permission. Meanwhile, she caked on makeup in an attempt to look older for him. When they finally married the following year, Taylor was 20 and he was 40. As she told Life years later, "With Michael Wilding, who was much older than I was, I wanted the calm and quiet and security of friendship." With all the focus, even long after their divorce in 1957, on Taylor's age gap with Wilding, it's quite odd that the man she left him for was actually 3 years older than he was. But while Wilding showed his age in look and action, or rather, inaction, husband number 3, the film producer Mike Todd, was a ball of non-stop energy. This probably explains why the 23-year age gap seemed less of an issue in their marriage than the 20 years that separated Taylor and Wilding. Later in life, Taylor would be the December half of a May-December romance when she married for the 8th time in 1991 to Larry Fortensky, who was 20 years her junior. Douglas Fairbanks Sr. and Sylvia Ashley. Often called Hollywood's first power couple, Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford were silent film superstars who were not only actors but producers who co-founded the successful United Artists Company with Charlie Chaplin. The pair had left their respective spouses to marry in 1919, but by 1931, there were cracks in the relationship. Then Fairbanks attended a party and met Lady Sylvia Ashley, the wife of the Earl of Shaftesbury's heir, Anthony Ashley Cooper. Fairbanks fell head over heels. In Pickford, the Woman Who Made Hollywood, Eileen Whitfield writes that by this point Pickford was 39 to Ashley's 26, and the actress felt she couldn't compare to the latter's beauty. For the next 2 years, Fairbanks jerked his wife around emotionally until he finally sent her a message from Europe that he wasn't coming back. Pickford leaked the telegram to an infamous gossip columnist and filed for divorce in 1933. The following year, Ashley Cooper divorced his wife and named Fairbanks as the reason. Fairbanks and Ashley married in March 1936 when they were 52 and 31, respectively. According to The Grit and the Pearl, The Scandalous Life of Margaret, Duchess of Argyll, by Lindsay Spence, the titular duchess was friends with the couple, but believed he was pathologically jealous of his wife and barely let her out of his sight, to the point Margaret found it unreasonable. Despite this, they stayed together until his death in 1939. Ashley would marry 3 more times. Husband number 4 was Clark Gable, Bing Crosby, and Katherine Grant. Bing Crosby was a widower, and Katherine Grant was just starting out in Hollywood when they began dating. Grant told Smashing Interviews magazine that their marriage was a long time coming. We kept meeting each other, and then we'd plan to get married, and he would have a kidney stone or something dreadful like that. We kept waiting, and I kept working. Later on, we finally managed to get married, which was a secret. The couple married in Las Vegas in 1957, and Grant revealed that when the press figured out the ceremony was going to happen imminently, Crosby told the reporters it was at a location hours away from the actual church, which allowed them to have a quiet, private wedding. She was 23, and he was 53, and balding, as a syndicated newspaper report on the ceremony, via the Columbia Missourian, unnecessarily pointed out. The 30-year age gap was clearly noticed, but when asked if she was constantly dealing with people commenting on it at the time, Grant said, "I suppose that happened, but I didn't hear it. By the time we had courted, I knew I liked him very much, and he liked me very much. By the time we married, I realized I could survive without him, and he realized he didn't want to survive without me. I liked that. That's a good attitude to enter a marriage with." The couple had 3 children, and were married until Crosby's death in 1977. Carlo Ponti and Sophia Loren. Actor Sophia Loren and producer Carlo Ponti were married from 1966 to his death in 2007. When asked about the secret to such a long marriage, she told the Sydney Morning Herald, "No secret. It was love at first sight for both of us. We met at a beauty contest in Rome when I was 16, and he was on the jury. He saw me sitting at a table with friends and sent me a note asking me to join the contest. I did, and I finished second. But the most important thing was that this was how we started to see each other, at first in a friendly way. Then it became serious when I was 19. We genuinely loved each other." At the time they met, Ponti was 38. Their ability to get married, however, was hampered because Ponti was already married, and as an Italian citizen it was almost impossible for him to get a divorce from his first wife. In 1957, he attempted to obtain both a divorce by proxy from his wife and a marriage by proxy to Loren using the Mexican courts. But according to Italian law, the divorce didn't exist, while the second marriage did, so Ponti was considered a bigamist. He then got the marriage to Loren annulled, which the Italian government agreed was valid but said he could still be charged since he had already committed bigamy. It was not until 1966 that the couple was able to legally marry after becoming French citizens. Cary Grant and Betsy Drake. By the time Cary Grant saw Betsy Drake perform in a play in London in 1947, he was 43, married and divorced twice, and one of the biggest movie stars in the world. When they ended up taking the same ship back to the U.S., they struck up a conversation and within 2 years they were married, despite a 19-year age difference. Their marriage saw him try but fail to retire from Hollywood, and she introduced him to LSD. But by 1956, when Grant left to film in Europe with Sophia Loren, their marriage was falling apart. It probably didn't help that Grant fell in love with the 22-year-old Lorraine, who by then had been involved with her much older future husband Carlo Ponti for several years. Regardless, the still married Grant proposed, although the young actress must have turned him down. Grant didn't even leave set to be by his wife's side when the ocean liner she was on sank after hitting another ship, killing 51 people but leaving Drake uninjured. Not long after, Grant and Drake separated, although they didn't end their marriage until 1962. Despite their divorce, Grant and Drake remained very close. He told the New York Times in 1973, "I'll be talking to Betsy later today, as a matter of fact. She's applying for her doctorate in psychology at UCLA. Betsy was a delightful comedienne, but I don't think that Hollywood was ever really her milieu. She wanted to help humanity, to help others help themselves." John Wayne and Pilar Palette. John Wayne and Pilar Paletti began a relationship when she moved to Los Angeles, but they had actually met once before, in 1952 in a jungle in Peru. She was starting out as an actress and filming a scene that involved dancing and fire. Wayne was impressed. He was also in a toxic marriage to his second wife, Esperanza Bauer. When they finally divorced, she accused him of abuse, and he accused her of infidelity. Of course, Wayne had been unfaithful as well. While the divorce dragged on, Palette realized she was pregnant and decided to have an abortion in part to protect Wayne's image. The couple finally married in 1954. He was 47 and she was 24. Palette told the Los Angeles Times in 1987 that despite being 23 years older than her, Wayne seemed like a lot younger man. He used to like to water ski. He loved the boat. He loved to dance. He was a wonderful dancer. And we had a lot of fun together. They had 3 children together over a 25-year marriage. The couple never divorced, although their relationship had its own problems, and they didn't live together for 6 years before Wayne died in 1979. He also left Palette out of his will, although his lawyers were quick to point out, according to the New York Times, this wasn't meant to be cruel, but that when they had separated, he'd already given her a settlement. Jerry Lee Lewis and Myra Gale Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis was technically a rock and roll star rather than an old Hollywood icon, but he did dip his toe into the latter world as well. In 1958, he had a cameo in the film High School Confidential, which, despite being terrible, starred many famous names, including John Barrymore and Charles Chaplin Jr. It was a small start, but according to Rolling Stone, people saw his career trajectory as a possible rival to Elvis Presley, which probably would have meant starring in his own movies. The same year that film was released, Lewis arrived in the UK for a planned European tour. At the airport, a reporter noticed a very young girl in his entourage and asked who she was and how old was she. He learned she was Lewis's wife, Myra Gale Brown, and she was 15. While that revelation was shocking to the British public, ironically, Lewis had claimed Brown was 15 in order to make their relationship seem acceptable. In reality, she was 13. He was 22. Oh, also, she was his second cousin. And since he hadn't been divorced from his first wife when he married Brown, he had committed bigamy. Any dreams of a Hollywood career rivaling Elvis's were destroyed at that moment, and it would be a decade until he attempted a comeback. Surprisingly, the marriage lasted until 1970, when Brown filed for a divorce and accused Lewis of abuse and adultery. Sure thing. Let's keep it casual and chatty, just like your original piece. Here are some more old Hollywood couples and affairs with those noticeable age gaps. Katherine Hepburn and Ludlow Ogden Smith. So Katherine Hepburn, the ultimate Hollywood legend, started dating Ludlow Ogden Smith when she was just 21. He was 42, a pretty hefty 21-year age gap. Smith was a wealthy investment guy who'd already been married twice, which made their relationship even more of a headline grabber. Their romance began while Kath was still tied to her second husband, definitely raising some eyebrows back in the day. Despite the gossip and the age difference, they stayed together until Smith passed away in 1951. Kath's marriage to Ludlow had its fair share of ups and downs, but it didn't hold her back from absolutely crushing her acting career. She kept shining on the big screen, proving that her talent and charisma were unstoppable, no matter what was going on in her personal life. Their relationship was a classic example of old Hollywood's complex love stories. Ava Gardner and Howard Hughes. Ava Gardner and Howard Hughes were another power couple in old Hollywood with a hefty age gap, 21 years between them. Ava was 21 when she tied the knot with the eccentric billionaire Hughes in 1957. Their relationship was nothing short of intense. Hughes, known for his reclusive lifestyle and controlling nature, tried to keep Ava close, which clashed with her fierce desire for independence and freedom. Ava wasn't one to be tied down, and Hughes's obsession with controlling every aspect of his life made their marriage a constant battleground. Their romance was all over the tabloids, with paparazzi constantly circling to catch a glimpse of the glamorous and wealthy duo. Despite the fiery connection and undeniable chemistry they shared, the age difference and their strong personalities created a volatile mix. Hughes' need for control and Ava's spirited nature often led to clashes, making it hard for them to find common ground. Their marriage lasted only about 4 years, dissolving in 1960 amidst rumors and speculations about Hughes' behavior and Ava's longing for a more normal life. Even though their marriage didn't last, Ava and Howard's relationship remains one of Hollywood's most talked-about stories. It perfectly captures the drama and complexities of old Hollywood romances, where love, power, and personality often collided in the most headline-grabbing ways. Greta Garbo and Prince Felix Yusupov. Greta Garbo, the mysterious Swedish icon, found herself swept up in a whirlwind romance with Prince Felix Yusupov, a Russian aristocrat. Picture this. Greta was 36, already a huge star with that enigmatic allure, and Felix was 62, a massive 26-year age gap. Their romance was like something out of a fairy tale, mixing Hollywood glam with old-world aristocratic charm. They met at one of those exclusive parties where the crème de la crème of society mingle, and sparks flew instantly. But as magical as it seemed, their relationship was pretty short-lived. Felix had some serious health issues that made things complicated, and Greta was all about her privacy. She wasn't one to let the paparazzi get too close, and Felix's aristocratic lifestyle wasn't exactly easy to hide from the press. Their age difference and the pressures from their different worlds made it tough to keep the romance going. Even though their time together was brief, it definitely caught everyone's attention. People loved the idea of a glamorous Hollywood star dating a mysterious Russian prince. It was the perfect headline fodder. Their story remains one of those intriguing old Hollywood romances where love, status, and secrecy all collided in the most fascinating way. Bette Davis and Jeff Chandler. Bette Davis, the fierce and iconic actress we all know and love, made headlines when she married Jeff Chandler in 1950. She was 42 and he was just 21, a whopping 21-year age gap. Their relationship was quite the surprise back then, with everyone raising their eyebrows at the significant difference in their ages. Bette, known for her strong personality and commanding screen presence, seemed like an unlikely match for the much younger Jeff, who was a rising star at the time. Despite the initial intrigue and the buzz it created in Hollywood circles, their marriage didn't last long and ended after 3 years. Still, their union remains a classic example of those big age differences that often popped up in Hollywood stories. It showed that even with all the glitz and glamour, relationships with huge age gaps could be just as complicated and short-lived as any other. Bette Davis and George Schaefer. Bette didn't stop with Jeff Chandler. She also had a thing with George Schaefer, a TV and stage director who was 20 years younger than her. Their relationship kicked off in the late 50s, a time when Bette was already a powerhouse in Hollywood, and George was making his mark behind the scenes. Despite the 20-year age gap, they hit it off pretty well. George brought a fresh, creative energy that Bette found intriguing, and she admired his directing chops. Of course, like any relationship, they had their ups and downs. Balancing Bette's intense career and George's rising trajectory wasn't always easy. They never got married, but their age difference didn't stop them from having a meaningful connection for a while. Their romance showed that even with a significant age gap, they could share some genuine moments and support each other's passions. It was one of those classic Hollywood stories where love and career intertwined in interesting ways. James Stewart and Gloria Hattrick McLean. James Stewart married Gloria Hattrick McLean when he was 37, and she was 28, a 9-year age gap. It's not as huge as some others, but it's still interesting in the context of Hollywood's relationship trends. They had a strong, supportive marriage that lasted until James passed away in 1997. Their partnership was a solid example of a lasting Hollywood marriage without the drama of a massive age difference.